Consciousness is vast, reality is fluid, and what we call the paranormal may just be part of the human experience. We move through life searching for certainty, but every so often something happens that challenges what we think we know. A flicker of movement in an empty room, an intuition too strong to ignore, or a moment that lingers long after it's passed. Some call it supernatural, others call it psychological, but maybe it's both. I'm Mallorie, a therapist exploring the threshold between psychology, the supernatural, and the transformations that happen in between. Whether it's unexplained phenomena, personal awakenings, or the ways our subconscious and the unknown intertwine, this is a space to wonder, to question, and to explore what these experiences mean for us. Because what matters most isn't what we experience, it's how it transforms us. Welcome to the Liminal Mind. Today on the Liminal Mind, we are wintering with the unseen. A solstice special, we're stepping into winter, not just the cold or the darkness or the holiday season, but the psychic and spiritual terrain of winter. The part of winter that has always been haunted, liminal, ancestral, and profoundly connected to the unseen. This is a long, immersive journey. One single episode that weaves together psychology, neuroscience, folklore, ancestral traditions, and paranormal experiences across time. And whether you're listening while driving at night, or sitting beside a candle, or curled up under a blanket with the early darkness outside, my hope is that this episode feels less like information and more like initiation. Because winter has always been a season of haunting, not frightening haunting, but human haunting. Memory, intuition, presence, longing, grief, and connection. The quiet voice of something just beyond the threshold. Let's begin. If you look at paranormal reporting patterns globally, modern reports, historical records, and archival data, you see a very strange consistency. Reports of hauntings, apparitions, knocks, footsteps, shadow figures, dream visitations, flickering lights, felt presence rise dramatically between late November and mid-January. This is not just anecdotal. The Rhine Research Center, which continues parapsychology research at Duke University, has found the exact same pattern. Winter is statistically the season with the highest reports of spontaneous paranormal experiences, and there are several reasons for this. Psychological, neurological, environmental, and cultural, all overlapping and amplifying each other. To understand winter hauntings, we have to understand what winter does to the mind. Human beings evolved in rhythmic cycles of light and dark. Our entire nervous system depends on sunrise and sunset to regulate sleep, attention, emotion, and perception. But winter disrupts these rhythms. Light decreases, darkness stretches into late morning and arrives in mid-afternoon. Melatonin increases, serotonin drops. Sleep becomes deeper, heavier, and more vivid. Researchers writing in Current Psychiatry Reports in 2018 noted that decreased sunlight increases liminal dreaming, emotional sensitivity, and what they call boundary thinness, the tendency for the borders between waking and dreaming, conscious and unconscious, to blur. This blurring isn't pathology. It's part of being human in winter, and it opens a psychological doorway. When the world is dark, our sensory systems shift. Vision interprets fewer details and relies more on pattern recognition, a state where intuition becomes sharper and shadows take on meaning. We become more attuned to subtle sounds, to silence itself, and to the emotional field of a room. Vision scientists at the University of Rochester note that low light conditions increase pareidotic perception, seeing figures or presences in ambiguous shapes. But they also increase intuitive accuracy because the brain uses holistic processing. This means that winter actually heightens both imagination and intuition simultaneously. The line between psychological and paranormal becomes fluid, And this isn't just cognitive, it's neurological. There's a phenomenon psychologists call the felt presence, the unmistakable sensation that someone unseen is standing just behind you or nearby. Neuroscientist Olaf Blank's research shows that this phenomenon activates the same brain regions used when a real person is physically present. Your brain makes no meaningful distinction. The felt presence is real to the nervous system, and winter increases its likelihood dramatically. Silence, isolation, darkness, cold, and the absence of visual stimuli. All of it pushes us closer to the edge of perception, where the psyche becomes porous. Environmental factors add an extra layer. Cold temperatures change the acoustics of houses. Wood contracts and expands. Static electricity increases in dry, cold air. Our pipes groan. The lights flicker. Drafts appear and vanish. Skeptics argue that these are natural explanations for hauntings, and sometimes they are. But paranormal investigators argue that these same conditions create ideal conductive environments for spirit activity. They don't replace the paranormal, they facilitate it. Nature itself is more liminal in winter. And then there's memory. A 2014 study in memory and cognition found that autobiographical memory increases significantly in winter months. People remember more. They remember more deeply. They remember more emotionally. Grief resurfaces. Longing resurfaces. Unfinished conversations rise to consciousness, and our unprocessed loss becomes harder to suppress. And across spiritual traditions, memory is one of the primary ways ancestors communicate. When a loved one comes to mind repeatedly, suddenly, and vividly, most cultures interpret that as a form of presence. Psychology calls it reactivation of attachment memory. Spirituality calls it visitation. And winter enhances both. This is why winter feels haunted. Not because something is wrong, but because winter awakens the exact conditions that make paranormal experience more likely. Silence, darkness, memory, emotion. This is a season of thresholds, and the thresholds are where spirits draw near. So far, we've been looking at winter through psychology, neuroscience, and environmental science. But none of this is new. Humans have always known that winter is haunted. What science explains now, folklore encoded thousands of years ago. Across almost every culture, winter is the season when spirits walk, ancestors return, and the boundary between worlds opens. Not for one night, but for weeks. Let's step into that ancient world. Long before winter was framed as festive lights and decorated trees, it was framed as spirit nights, a season when the dead returned, a season when ancestors visited, and a season when the air was full of presence. If you look into ancient Norse, Germanic, Celtic, Slavic, First Nations, East Asian, and many African traditions, they all share the same astonishing belief. The dead walk in winter. This belief appears independently across cultures that never interacted, which suggests it's rooted in universal human experience. Let's explore a few of them. In Northern Europe, the Norse marked the midwinter ceremony of Yule. They believed that during this time, the dead rode through the sky in a ghostly procession called the Wild Hunt, led by Odin. People stayed indoors after dark, not out of fear, but out of reverence. The Wild Hunt was not malevolent, it was powerful. Ancestors, spirits, gods, and spectral animals moved through storm winds, searching, warning, and communicating. The world was not empty at night. In Slavic cultures, December was filled with spirit nights, evenings when the dead returned home to visit their families. Anthropologist Linda Evantis documents these in Slavic folklore, a handbook. Families would leave bread, honey, and vodka on tables. Homes stayed filled with candlelight through the night. These rituals still happen in some parts of Poland, Ukraine, and Russia on Christmas Eve. A plate set aside for the dead, an open seat, a vigil of presence. Not superstition, hospitality. In Celtic regions, midwinter is also a thin time. The ancient Irish and Scottish people believed the solstice opened a doorway between the living and the other world. The solstice nights were associated with the appearance of fae beings, ancestral spirits, and prophetic dreams. The Celts did not fear these nights, they prepared for them. Similarly, many First Nations and indigenous traditions in North America regard winter as the season of storytelling, connection with ancestors. Anthropologist Bar Tolkien wrote that winter nights were understood as a time when the world was quiet enough for ancestral guidance to reach the living. In East Asia, the Winter Solstice Festival involves visiting ancestral altars, lighting incense, and inviting the spirits of family members to share warmth and food. In Japanese Shinto traditions, winter is associated with the ancestral kami who travel between realms. What all these traditions tell us is simple and profound. Winter is the ancestral season, when the veil thins and when we are not alone. And it doesn't matter where you look. Norse, Celtic, Slavic, Indigenous, East Asian, the story is the same. Winter is for visitors. So we've looked at the psychological and ancestral layers of winter. But now we shift into something you may not expect. Christmas itself. The modern, cozy, glittering holiday was once understood as a supernatural event, a night of visitations, ghosts, a night of moral reckoning, a night when the dead appeared to teach the living. So let's step into that forgotten tradition. Long before Christmas was associated with gifts and lights, it was associated with ghosts. Victorian England, the culture that shaped much of modern Christmas imagery, fully embraced Christmas as a ghost season. Families gathered on Christmas Eve, not to read cheerful stories, but to exchange ghost stories. Magazines published ghost stories every December. Public readings were held. Writers like M.R. James and Henry James crafted ghost tales specifically for Christmas audiences. Charles Dickens wrote multiple Christmas ghost stories, not just A Christmas Carol. Why? Because the Victorians had a deep psychological understanding that winter awakens memory, regret, longing, and moral awareness. The perfect terrain for ghost stories. Ghosts were mirrors, they were teachers, and they were reminders of what mattered. A Christmas Carol is the perfect example of that. It's not a cheerful holiday tale, it's a shamanic journey. Ebenezer Scrooge undergoes what anthropologists would call a symbolic death, guided by spirits through past, present, and future, a descent, an initiation, and a rebirth. It is an initiation ritual disguised as holiday story, and it resonated because it mirrored what people already felt, that the dead come close in winter. Holiday hauntings are not an anomaly, they're tradition. Even today, psychologists note that the holidays intensify grief and memory. Loved ones who have passed often come to mind more vividly, more painfully, and more tenderly in December than any other time. The American Psychological Association's 2019 Holiday Grief Report found that grief spikes 40 to 50% during the winter months due to environmental, emotional, and social triggers. But spiritual traditions offer a different explanation. Spirits come back around the holidays because that's when families gather, rituals repeat, and memory becomes a form of calling. In other words, we summon them without meaning to. And they answer through dreams, sense, synchronicities, through those small electrical signs, through presence. Botkin's research on after-death communication shows that visitation dreams, the ones that feel more real than real, occur more often during emotionally charged seasons and in winter months. Dream visitations share certain characteristics: clarity, warmth, coherence, and meaningful messages. They rarely feel terrifying. They feel like a reunion. Winter deepens these dreams. There are longer nights, we get more REM sleep, and there's more emotional processing. Psychology explains the mechanics, and spirituality explains the meaning. For many listeners, these moments are not theoretical. Moments of love, presence, where the veil did not just thin, it dissolved. Moments like that are extremely common in winter, and extremely significant psychologically and spiritually, because winter doesn't just invite the dead closer, it invites meaning closer, and meaning is the bridge between worlds. So far, we've explored the ghosts of Christmas historically, the psychology of winter nostalgia, and the paranormal patterns of the holiday season. What all of this points to is not the presence of fear, but the presence of meaning. Which brings us to the heart of this episode, why these winter hauntings matter. Winter is a season of reckoning. It strips away what is unnecessary and invites reflection. It slows the world long enough that the unseen rises through the cracks. Every winter haunting, whether it's a whisper, shadow, flicker, or dream, or a memory that suddenly feels like a presence, carries the same invitation. Remember. Remember who you've been and who you've lost. Remember what matters, what needs forgiveness, and what needs to be let go. Remember what needs to be healed. Ghost stories, whether Victorian or ancestral, are not simply stories. They are moral and psychological mirrors. They hold up what has been forgotten, what has been suppressed, and what still needs to be integrated. Winter hauntings in folklore and psychology are part of an ancient cycle: descent, reckoning, integration, and rebirth. They are invitations into consciousness. Anthropologist Arnold van Gennep called this the liminal phase of transformation, the space between identities, between worlds, the dark corridor before renewal. Winter is that corridor, and hauntings are the reminders that we are never walking it alone. As we close this episode, I want to offer a simple winter ritual that honors both psychology and ancestry. A ritual of listening rather than summoning. Choose a quiet winter night, the solstice, Christmas Eve, New Year's Eve, or a night when the world feels still. Turn off the lights and light one candle. Sit with it for a moment and let the flame settle. When the room feels ready, speak aloud the name of someone you've lost, someone you still love, someone whose presence lingers in memory. Say their name slowly, and then state you are welcome in this season. You're not calling a ghost. You're opening a door inside yourself, a door that winter is already unlocking. Sit with whatever rises: a memory, warmth, a sense of being accompanied, a breath that isn't yours, and a quieting of the heart. Whatever comes, let it arrive without fear. This is not conjuring, it's remembering. This is meaning making. This is winter. Thank you for walking with me through this winter descent, through science and story, psychology and myth, memory and haunting. Winter is not the end of the year. It is the threshold of the unseen. A season of slow transformation carried by silence, shaped by the dark, and illuminated by the flicker of what we cannot fully explain. And whether you interpret these experiences as ancestral, psychological, spiritual, or something beautifully in between, winter is an invitation. An invitation to listen, to feel, to remember, to integrate, and to transform. Because what matters most isn't what we experience, it's how it transforms us.